The chandeliers burned like captive stars above the ballroom, their light falling over a sea of silk and powdered smiles. The year was 1814, and London season glittered brighter than ever, though not for Lady Eleanor Whitcombe. At 45, she stood at the edge of the great marble floor, her gloved hands clasped before her like a prayer. Her gown, though modestly cut and finely sewn, bore no jewels to catch the light. Her hair, once golden, was now threaded with silver. She was not ugly, nor even plain, merely forgotten, and that, in society's eyes, was far worse. Around her, whispers floated like perfume. Poor Lady Whitcombe, still attending these affairs? Desperate, perhaps? Another voice, lower and crueler, followed. Desperate and deluded. The words brushed against Eleanor's ear like frost. She smiled politely, as women were taught to do, and turned toward the refreshment table, her eyes lowered to hide the hurt. For years, she had lived quietly in the countryside after her husband's death. Sir Edmund Whitcombe, a baronet of good breeding and terrible debts. London had not mourned him long, and neither, if she was honest, had she. Yet, loneliness crept into the corners of her house like ivy, and when spring came, so did the invitation from her old friend, Lady Pembroke. You must come for the season, Eleanor. You deserve one more chance at happiness. One more chance. The phrase echoed in her mind, absurdly tender, as she moved through the glittering crowd. Men danced with girls barely half her age, their laughter light and careless. Beauty, in this room, was currency, and Eleanor's had long been spent. She felt every curve of her body as a burden, every glance as judgment. It was near midnight when the orchestra paused, and a ripple of movement announced a new arrival. The Duke of Ravenshire had entered. Even among titled men, Alexander Ravenshire was a legend, a bachelor, wealthy beyond measure, and far too handsome for the comfort of married women. Rumor said he had refused every lady of rank presented to him these past 3 seasons. Some whispered he was haunted by a lost love. Others said he found society too false to entertain. Eleanor did not turn to look at him. She had no business admiring men like him, men who belonged to the world that had forgotten her. Yet, fate has a strange fondness for irony. She heard his voice before she saw him, low, even, tinged with amusement. Do you find the orchestra lacking, my lady, or the company? She looked up, startled, and found the Duke himself standing beside her. The world around them blurred, the murmurs receding into silence. I find both adequate, your grace, she replied, managing a soft smile. Adequate. His lips curved slightly. That is not high praise. She inclined her head. Perhaps I am not easily impressed. The Duke studied her for a moment too long. His eyes were gray, like clouds before rain, and they held no mockery. Yet Eleanor felt exposed, as though he could see the quiet ache beneath her calm composure. He gestured toward the balcony. A moment of fresh air, Lady Whitcombe? She hesitated. Accepting could invite talk. Declining could appear rude. For once, she chose the bolder path. Very well, your grace. Outside, the air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of lilacs from the garden below. The stars shimmered faintly, blurred by London smoke. Eleanor drew her shawl tighter. Forgive me, he said softly, but I believe I've seen you before, many years ago, perhaps. My late husband and I once attended your estate's summer gathering, she admitted, though I dare say you had finer company to remember. On the contrary, he said, I recall a woman who looked out upon a lake rather than into the mirrors. She blinked, surprised. You remember that? I remember honesty when I see it, rarity in our circles. Her laugh was faint, bitter. Honesty is not a virtue here, your grace. It is an inconvenience. And yet you keep it, he said. I have little else left to keep. There was silence, soft, fragile. A waltz began again inside, distant and muffled. The Duke looked at her, his gaze steady, searching. May I ask something impertinent? Given the hour, I doubt it would shock me, she murmured. He leaned closer, his voice gentler now. Why do you attend such places if they wound you? Her breath caught. She had not realized anyone had noticed. Because, she whispered, I must remind myself I still exist. His expression changed, something human, almost tender. "That," he said quietly, "is a reason I understand all too well." For a long moment, they stood without speaking. The wind lifted a curl from her temple, and he reached, almost unconsciously, to tuck it behind her ear. The gesture startled her, not for its boldness, but its sincerity. No one had touched her so gently in years. Yet the moment shattered as laughter drifted from the doorway. Two young women watching, giggling behind their fans. "The Duke and Lady Whitcombe," one whispered loudly enough to be heard. "How charmingly tragic." Eleanor stepped back, color flooding her cheeks. "Your Grace, I should not." He interrupted, his tone firm but kind. "Let them talk. I cannot afford scandal. And I cannot endure another evening of empty conversation." The tension between them hung, fragile as glass. She turned toward the ballroom lights, her heart aching with both shame and wonder. "You risk your reputation, sir," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Then perhaps it is time someone did." Before she could answer, he bowed slightly and returned inside, leaving her beneath the stars, her heart unsteady, her thoughts aflame. She remained there for several minutes, listening to the fading waltz, the echo of his words pulsing like distant thunder. When she finally re-entered the ballroom, the whispers had already begun to spread. A widow and a duke upon the balcony. How delightfully improper. Yet as she crossed the floor head high, she felt something shift within her, a spark of defiance she had long thought dead. That night, alone in her chamber, Eleanor gazed at her reflection. The face that stared back was lined, yes, but alive, no longer dulled by resignation. She touched her cheek, where his hand had brushed her skin, and a tear slipped free, not of sorrow, but of something perilously close to hope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder what it might feel like, to be seen, not pitied, to be wanted, not for beauty, but for truth. And somewhere, in another wing of the city, the Duke of Ravenshire found himself standing by his window, remembering her words. "I must remind myself I still exist." He smiled faintly to the dark. "Then perhaps," he murmured, "I might remind her that she does." Morning light spilled through the tall windows of Lady Pembroke's townhouse, gilding the lace curtains in soft gold. The city beyond stirred with carriages and chatter, but inside, the world was quieter, until the rustle of newspapers shattered the peace. "Eleanor," Lady Pembroke said, lowering her spectacles with dramatic flair, "you've made the gossip column." Eleanor froze mid-sip of tea. "Surely not." Her friend's voice was half scandalized, half amused. The Duke of Ravenshire, long thought immune to Cupid's arrow, was seen in unusually close conversation with Lady Eleanor Whitcombe beneath the balcony stars. She looked up with a smirk. "It appears, my dear, you are no longer invisible." Eleanor's hands trembled around the porcelain cup. "It was a brief conversation, Pembroke. Nothing more. Brief or not, it has tongues wagging. You know how London feeds on whispers." Eleanor sighed, setting her cup aside. "Then let them feast. I am too old to care for such trivialities." Her friend's gaze softened. "You say that, yet I can see the color in your cheeks. Admit it. He stirred something in you." Eleanor turned toward the window, watching the sunlight dance across the polished street. "He was kind," she said quietly. "That is all. Men of his rank are rarely kind without reason." Unbeknownst to her, at that very moment, the Duke of Ravenshire sat in his study across Grosvenor Square, his expression unreadable as his butler presented the same paper. "So they noticed," he murmured, scanning the familiar name. The corner of his mouth lifted, though his eyes betrayed a glint of irritation. "It seems I cannot speak to a woman without London imagining a proposal." The butler, trained in discretion, gave a polite cough. "Shall I issue a denial, Your Grace?" "No," Ravenshire said, folding the paper neatly. "Let them talk. For once, their chatter might serve a purpose." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. He had attended countless balls, smiled through endless introductions, and found only vanity draped in lace. But that night, Lady Whitcombe's voice, soft yet unflinching, had cut through the pretense like a blade. "I must remind myself I still exist." The words haunted him. Later that week, invitations bloomed across London like spring flowers, and though Eleanor wished to avoid further attention, Lady Pembroke insisted on attending Lord Blackwell's masquerade. "If you stay away now, they'll think you're ashamed. Better to face them, chin high." So she went, against her better judgment. Her gown that evening was midnight blue, the color of calm seas, and though she wore no diamonds, the candlelight found a quiet radiance in her eyes. The ballroom was a garden of masks, gold, ivory, peacock feathers, and painted smiles. Music swelled, laughter echoed. Eleanor moved carefully among the guests, aware of glances that lingered too long, of murmurs that scattered like sparks. She tried to ignore them. Then, near the center of the room, she saw him, the Duke unmasked, tall, composed, dressed in black with a silver crest at his shoulder. He looked directly at her, as though there were no one else in the room. Her pulse stuttered. She turned away, pretending interest in the orchestra. Moments later, she felt a presence beside her. "You wear the color of twilight," he said softly. She inhaled sharply, not daring to meet his gaze. "Your Grace, you invite more gossip merely by standing near me." "Then let us give them something worth gossiping about," he replied, offering his gloved hand. "May I have this dance?" Her hesitation lasted only a heartbeat. "You may." The waltz began, slow and solemn. When his hand touched her waist, a tremor passed through her, not of fear, but of recognition. The world narrowed to music, and the sound of his breath near her ear. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "Why?" he murmured back. "Because I am not what they expect you to want." His eyes held hers. "And you imagine I live for their expectations?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She felt something shifting, an unseen tide pulling her toward a place she had long believed lost. When the dance ended, applause rose faintly from the crowd, though she barely heard it. Only when she stepped back did she notice the stares. Fans fluttered, whispers slithered. Her stomach twisted. "You see," she said under her breath, "they will tear me apart for this." "Then I shall give them reason to stop whispering," he said quietly. Before she could ask what he meant, he bowed, brushed his lips against her gloved hand, and turned to speak, with Lord Pembroke. The gesture, though chaste, carried the weight of public declaration. Gasps rippled through the room. The Duke of Ravenshire had made his interest known. Eleanor's world tilted. Every eye seemed to bore into her as she fled toward the terrace, her breath quick and uneven. She leaned against the cold stone balustrade, her mind spinning. What was he doing? Was this some cruel amusement? Or had she truly seen sincerity in his gaze? Moments later, the door opened behind her. "I frightened you," he said. She turned, startled. "You astonished me, Your Grace. There is a difference." He stepped closer, his tone softer. "Then allow me to explain. I meant no harm, but when men mock sincerity, I find I cannot stand idle. You hardly know me. I know loneliness when I see it. I know strength when others mistake it for silence. And I know that a woman who dares to be honest in a world of performance is worth every scandal in London." Her composure cracked. "Do you even hear yourself? You risk reputation, alliances, everything, for a woman with nothing left to offer." He regarded her gently. "Nothing. You underestimate yourself, Lady Whitcombe. Loyalty, courage, honesty, those are rarer than beauty, and infinitely more lasting." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "You speak as though I am some noble virtue, not a flawed creature who has lived too long." "Flawed," he echoed. "Then perhaps we are well matched, for I am tired of perfection." Silence stretched between them again, heavy with unspoken longing. He reached into his coat and withdrew something small, a folded handkerchief embroidered with the Ravenshire crest. "If ever the weight of whispers grows unbearable," he said, pressing it into her hand, "send this to me. I will come." Before she could reply, a voice called from within, "Your Grace, the Viscount requests your presence." He inclined his head. "Until then, my lady." And he was gone, leaving her standing beneath the pale moonlight, clutching the token that seemed to burn against her palm. That night, back at Lady Pembroke's house, Eleanor unfolded the handkerchief under her candlelight. The embroidery was fine, the crest gleaming faintly in gold thread. For a moment, she let herself smile, a small, fragile thing. But as dawn crept across the horizon, reality returned. He was a duke, bound by duty, expected to marry a girl of breeding and beauty. She was a widow, burdened by whispers. Whatever warmth had passed between them was a dream, sweet, dangerous, and impossible. Still, when she tucked the handkerchief beneath her pillow, she did so carefully, as if it were something precious. In another part of the city, the Duke lay awake in his chamber, thinking of her. Around him, the night was silent, but in his mind echoed her words. You risk everything for a woman with nothing left to offer. He smiled faintly into the darkness. Then perhaps she'll come to see, he murmured, that what she offers is everything I've been searching for. Rain swept across the streets of Mayfair, painting the cobblestones in mirrors of silver and shadow. A fortnight had passed since the masquerade, yet Eleanor could not escape its memory. The press of his hand, the steady calm in his voice, the shocking tenderness of his gesture before all of London. She had convinced herself it was a fleeting madness, a moment born of pity rather than passion. And yet, each night, when she retired to her room, her fingers found the handkerchief hidden beneath her pillow, its crest faintly catching the candlelight, like a silent promise. Society had not been kind. The whispers had multiplied. At every tea and carriage ride, Eleanor heard her name trailing behind hers in murmured tones. A widow Pastor Bloom thinks herself desired by a duke. Some mocked, others pitied. None believed his attentions genuine. Even Lady Pembroke, though loyal, had begun to caution her. He may mean no harm, my dear, she said one morning, but men of his rank live under scrutiny. A single rumor can turn affection to ruin. Eleanor had nodded, pretending indifference, though her heart had clenched in quiet rebellion. Then, one rain-heavy afternoon, a letter arrived. No seal, no signature, only a simple fold, the paper faintly scented of tobacco and rain. Inside, in the bold, unmistakable hand of the Duke, were 6 words. Meet me at Ravenshire House. Tonight. Her pulse quickened. Ravenshire House, his private London residence. She should not go. Decency forbade it. Yet the thought of refusing, of letting this fragile connection dissolve into nothing, filled her with unbearable emptiness. As twilight fell, she stood before her mirror, breath unsteady. She dressed plainly, choosing a dark wool cloak, her bonnet low over her brow. The city, wrapped in mist, seemed to hold its breath as she stepped into her carriage. The gates of Ravenshire House loomed tall and black against the rain. A footman met her without question and led her through silent corridors lit by flickering lamps. She expected company, servants, perhaps propriety maintained, but there was none. The Duke awaited her alone in the library, the firelight throwing amber across his face. He turned as she entered, and for a moment neither spoke. "My lady," he said at last, his voice softer than she remembered. "You came." "I should not have," she replied, her voice trembling despite her composure. "This is madness." "Perhaps," he said, stepping closer, "but sometimes madness is the only honest thing left to us." She tried to steady her breath. "If anyone were to know I came here—" "They will not," he interrupted. "I have dismissed the staff for the evening." "That hardly improves the scandal," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "Then let scandal come." She looked at him then, really looked. The mask of aristocratic calm had slipped away. There was something weary in his eyes, a loneliness that mirrored her own. "Why, Your Grace?" she asked quietly. "Why persist in this dangerous kindness?" He regarded her for a long moment before answering. "Because I am tired of the polite deceit that passes for affection. Because I have watched you endure cruelty with dignity, and I find myself—" He hesitated, searching for the word, undone by it. Her throat tightened. "You do not know me." "Then let me," he said simply. The fire crackled, the only sound between them. Outside, the rain drummed softly against the windows, a rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Eleanor turned away, her hands clasped to hide their trembling. "You speak as though I am some heroine in one of Mrs. Radcliffe's novels. But I am not young, nor beautiful. You will tire of your fascination soon enough. He moved behind her, his voice low. You think beauty is youth. I think it is truth unmasked. She turned to face him, anger and longing warring in her chest. You play a dangerous game, Your Grace. You may endure whispers for a week, a month, but I will live with them forever. He took another step forward, closing the space between them. Then let me give them something worth whispering about. Her heart hammered. Do not toy with me. I would sooner wound myself. He reached out, not to touch her, but to offer the token she had once held. The handkerchief, folded neatly, lay in his palm. You never sent it, he said, so I came instead. She stared at it, tears stinging her eyes. Because I had no right to summon a man like you. He shook his head. A man like me? I have titles, yes. But what use is rank when it binds the heart in chains? You call yourself unworthy, but tell me, who else in this city has the courage to look at me without flattery? Silence pressed between them, thick and electric. The firelight caught the edges of her tears as she whispered, Why me, Alexander? At the sound of his name on her lips, something shifted in him. Because, he said quietly, when you stood alone in that ballroom, surrounded by those who pretended grace, you reminded me what grace truly is. Her composure faltered. And what do you wish of me now? Only honesty. She hesitated. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then you shall have it, she said. I have lived too long pretending not to feel. When I see you, I feel alive. And that terrifies me. He stepped closer, until his breath warmed her cheek. You are not alone in that terror. Her gaze met his, steady, searching. But this cannot end well. Then let it not end, he said softly. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. She felt the pull between them, fragile, forbidden, real. The air thickened with unsaid things, with the weight of years unlived. And then, just as his hand brushed hers, the clock struck 11, sharp and echoing. She drew back, the spell breaking. I must go, she whispered. He exhaled slowly. Will you at least let me escort you to your carriage? No, she said, forcing a smile through her trembling. If I allow you to be gallant, I may not have the strength to leave. He gave a low laugh, soft, sorrowful. Then promise me something, Eleanor. What? That you will not let their cruelty make you smaller. Her eyes glistened. I have survived worse, Your Grace. I know, he said. That is what frightens me most. She turned toward the door, her cloak clutched tight around her shoulders. The firelight flickered against her back, casting her shadow long across the floor. Just before she stepped into the hall, she paused. You once told me that truth unmasked is beauty, she said. Then hear mine. You are dangerous, not for what you do, but for what you make me remember. He took a single step forward, his voice rough with feeling. And what is that? That I was once capable of being loved. The word struck him like a confession and a wound all at once. She did not wait for his reply. The door closed softly behind her, and he stood alone in the firelight, the echo of her voice lingering like perfume. Outside, her carriage wheels splashed through the rain, carrying her away into the mist. Yet for the first time in years, she felt the ache of leaving not as sorrow, but as proof that she had lived again. And in the library, the Duke remained motionless, his hand still holding the handkerchief she had refused to send, knowing that, somehow, this night had changed everything. The morning after the storm, a pale sunlight crept through the mullioned windows of Ravenshire Hall, painting gold upon the marble floors. Lady Eleanor stood before the great mirror of her borrowed chamber, her reflection softened by the haze of dawn. Her gown was modest, her hair loosely braided, her eyes carrying the memory of what had passed between her and the Duke, the confession in the firelight, the tremor in his voice when he'd spoken of her as his equal. She touched her cheek, where his hand had lingered, as though to confirm it had truly happened. But even as warmth spread through her chest, a chill reminder followed. Society would not forgive easily. Not the Duke, and certainly not a 45-year-old widow who had dared to be seen as desirable again. Downstairs, the house stirred with whispers. The Duchess Dowager had arrived early, her carriage cutting through the mist like a dagger. With her came Lady Honoria Vexley, the ton's most glittering gossip, who had somehow heard of Eleanor's stay. Eleanor could almost hear them below, their voices sharp as glass. She lured him, the Duke, with pity and pretense. The cruel rhythm of rumor moved swiftly, for scandal in England always traveled faster than light. Eleanor's heart beat unsteadily as she gathered her shawl, ready to face what she must. In the grand drawing-room, Alexander stood like a man awaiting trial. His mother's expression was one of frozen composure, but her eyes blazed. "You've forgotten who you are," she said. "A duke does not lose himself to loneliness. That woman, her name," Alexander cut in quietly, "is Lady Eleanor Whitcombe, and she has more dignity in her silence than I have seen in all the parlors of Mayfair." The dowager's jaw tightened. "Dignity? She is 45. She has nothing to offer you but a quiet scandal." "She offers peace," he said simply, "and I find that a rare thing." Lady Honoria's laughter rang behind her gloved hand. "Peace, your grace? Or defiance? The ton is already whispering. She will ruin you." Eleanor, who had entered unseen, spoke then, her voice steady, her face pale but proud. "Then let them whisper." All eyes turned to her. "I have lived half my life in silence, while others dictated what I was worth. If the price of honesty is ruin, then I accept it." For a moment, the dowager's poise faltered. Even Honoria's smile wavered, as though she could not quite comprehend the quiet steel in Eleanor's tone. The room fell into stillness. Only the ticking of the clock filled it. Alexander crossed the space between them, his boots sounding against the marble. "Eleanor," he said softly, "will you walk with me?" Outside, the frost glittered on the lawns like powdered glass. He led her toward the frozen fountain, where water glimmered beneath a thin shell of ice. "They think I act from pity," he murmured, "but the truth is far simpler. I am tired of pretending that love must follow rules written by fear." Eleanor looked away, her breath clouding in the cold. "You have a duty, Alexander. Your title is not just your name. It is your chain. I will not be the cause of your downfall." He turned her gently to face him. "And if my downfall is what brings me peace? If ruin means the freedom to choose the woman I admire?" Her eyes filled, but her lips trembled with a faint smile. "You speak like a man who's never lost everything." "I have, my lord. I know what it costs to defy society." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "Then let us defy it together." At that instant, the church bells of Ravenshire village began to toll, distant, haunting, like the echo of fate itself. In that sound, Eleanor felt something break and rebuild inside her. She realized that the world would always find ways to shame a woman who dared to love beyond her station, beyond her years, beyond what men deemed beautiful. But she also saw the truth. Courage was not in youth or beauty, but in the willingness to be seen completely, without apology. Days passed, and gossip spread through London like wildfire. Some called it madness. Others called it romance. Invitations arrived for neither of them now. But the Duke of Ravenshire appeared at the next ball regardless, his arm linked firmly with Eleanor's. The orchestra paused mid-note when they entered. Conversations froze, fans halted mid-wave. And then, one by one, people bowed, not out of admiration, but out of reluctant respect, for there was something in the Duke's unflinching gaze that silenced mockery. Eleanor's heart pounded as they crossed the ballroom floor. "They are staring," she whispered. "Let them," Alexander replied. "For once, they are seeing something honest." He led her into the dance. The violins began again, soft, trembling, like the heartbeat of something reborn. As they moved together, her nerves melted into grace. His hand at her back was steady, his eyes never leaving hers. The chandeliers above threw down rivers of light, catching in her hair like gold. She was not the forgotten widow now, nor the subject of pitying glances. She was simply a woman seen, desired, cherished. By the final turn, the entire ballroom watched in silence, and when the music ended, Alexander bowed before her, deeply, reverently, in defiance of every unspoken law of rank and beauty. A murmur rippled through the crowd. For once, scandal had taken the shape of something noble. Later that night, as rain began to fall against the windows of Ravenshire Hall. Eleanor stood by the fire. Alexander approached quietly, the crackle of embers reflecting in his eyes. "You've changed everything," he said. "No," she whispered. "You simply saw what was already there." He took her hand, pressing it to his lips. "Then promise me, you will never doubt your worth again." Tears shimmered in her lashes as she smiled. "And you, promise me you'll never let the world tell you whom to love." He nodded once. "I already haven't." Outside, the storm raged softly, as though blessing the defiance that had rewritten 2 lives. Within those walls, scandal had turned to legend, loneliness into belonging, and pity into reverence. Lady Eleanor Whitcombe, the woman once whispered about, had become the heart of Ravenshire. And so, in the quiet that followed, the narrator's voice might have said, in a world where beauty was currency and age a sentence, one woman's honesty taught a duke that love, when true, is the only rebellion worth keeping.